From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
President-elect Donald Trump holds a press conference where he muses about the U.S. potentially acquiring Greenland, the Panama Canal, and maybe even Canada, while also saying he wants a policy of no new wind farms being constructed in the U.S. Welcome, I'm Kyle Peterson with the Wall Street Journal. We're joined today by my colleagues, columnists Bill McGurn and Alicia Finley. Well, happy days are here again for the White House press corps. After 4 years of a distant and aloof President Joe Biden, the next leader of the United States very soon will be a man who loves doing press conferences. On Tuesday, Donald Trump was at Mar-a-Lago answering questions on a range of topics for more than an hour. We could talk for a long time about all the hot spots that he hit. He's talking about changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, for one thing. So throw out your atlases and your globes. But let's talk about two subjects in particular that he touched on. One is this idea of a new manifest destiny for the MAGA era. Here is President Trump talking about the Panama Canal.
They want $3 billion to fix the Panama Canal that's run by China and makes a lot of money, China. One of the most profitable structures ever built because you have ships lined up back to Florida, frankly, and they just keep going through. And the numbers are staggering, $500,000 to $1 million a ship. And they took it away from us, meaning we gave it to them for $1. But not going to happen. What they've done to us, they've charged us, they've overcharged our ships, overcharged our Navy. And then when they need repair money, they come to the United States to put it up. We get nothing. Those days are over.
Here is the president-elect on the island of Greenland.
Well, we need Greenland for national security purposes. I've been told that for a long time, long before I even ran. I mean, people have been talking about it for a long time. You have approximately 45,000 people there. People really don't even know if Denmark has any legal right to it. But if they do, they should give it up because we need it for national security. That's for the free world. I'm talking about protecting the free world.
Trump, when he was asked, refused to rule out taking some kind of military action against Greenland and Panama. He did rule that out with respect to Canada, which he's also been discussing as America's 51st state, calling Prime Minister Justin Trudeau governor. Here was the question Bill asked by a member of the press corps, asked if he was considering military force to annex and acquire Canada. And here's Trump's reply, no, economic force, because Canada and the United States, that would really be something. You get rid of that artificially drawn line and you take a look at what that looks like. Bill, I think this is a perfect example of the difficulty sometimes of parsing Donald Trump is you have to start with the premise that at least some of the time he is pulling the press's leg. He's trying to be interesting, trying to get a rise out of people.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I'm not fluent in all Trump speak, but I think Selena Zito had it right when she says, you know, his critics take him literally but not seriously, and his friends take him seriously but not literally. In this case, I go to the latter. I think he's making good points about all these. And what I take the overall message is new sheriff in town. We want a better deal on everything. Now, the problem is with Trump, we don't know what the deal he wants in the canal is. We don't know what he really wants from Greenland. We know it's rich in some resources, and we also know it's very strategically important. And that there's talk of independence for Greenland. You know, they have a tiny population. I think it's 57,000. And you could see them spinning off from Denmark. But there are all sorts of arrangements that we could have apart from going and taking it that would redound to our benefit, mostly involving a security alliance of some sort.
I'd second what Bill said. The idea of annexing Canada is not one that I think even Mr. Trump probably takes seriously. There's no indication that Canadians would want that. And by the way, Canada has a pretty liberal political culture, so Trump would be essentially adding a big new California to the U.S. political system, which I don't think he wants. He has a point on defense spending, for one. Canada is a member of NATO, but does not meet the alliance's spending target of 2% of GDP on defense. It is said that it will do that, but only by 2032. On the other hand, Justin Trudeau just said he's stepping down. There's going to be an election coming up soon. And the more that Trump leans into belittling Canada and calling it America's next real estate deal, maybe the 51st state, the more that he is going to fuel nationalist sentiments of whatever politician, the conservative leader, it is running in that election. And the same, by the way, is true in Greenland. Alicia, I don't think acquiring Greenland is all that crazy of an idea. The U.S. thought about that around the same time in the 1860s that it bought Alaska. During the Cold War, Harry Truman's administration made an offer for Greenland in 1946. It has a small population, unlike Canada. It can't really be defended by the old colonial ruler, which is Denmark. And it's in a strategic location in the Arctic, which China and Russia both have designs on, and on a pretty direct air pathway between the U.S. and Russia, which was part of the interest by the Truman administration. But Alicia, to my mind, the way to approach that is not with this kind of bullying. It's with wooing and trying to show Greenlanders, about 50,000 people who live there, that they have an interest in the U.S. just as the U.S. may have an interest in Greenland.
Kyle, you covered most of it right there. But one other issue with Greenland, or one key asset it has, is also its strategic minerals. Maybe this is something that Trump may have in mind, is it has a large amount of rare earth minerals. And really, there are very few places in the world that do. China right now has a monopoly on a lot of those. So yes, having better access to that would be a strategic advantage in the U.S., especially because it's becoming increasingly difficult to mine any kind of critical minerals or rare earth minerals in the U.S. And as you mentioned, Russia and China do have their eyes on the Arctic. They're trying to, both for military reasons and commercial reasons, increase it as a shipping lane, which would be redound to China's benefit. It would be a faster route. But it's also a key military outpost. We have a Space Force base there, and it has a ballistic early warning system. The U.S. Embassy there has said that it doesn't intend to increase the U.S. military presence. But I could see a defense agreement or cooperation agreement in which the U.S. is able to utilize more of its resources as a bulwark against China and Russia in the Arctic. And then one other thing I want to go back on to your point about Canada and Trump's remarks, wouldn't it be great if we just had one big U.S. and there was no border? Well, that's kind of was the purpose of the USMCA and NAFTA, which is he's essentially trying to blow up with tariffs. So he seems to be working at cross purposes here. If he really wants to expand the U.S. influence in Canada, I think the best way of doing that is by improving trade relations and reducing tariff barriers.
Bill, what's your take on this as a matter of diplomatic finesse? And I'd add a couple of other pieces of information here. One is that this is a story from January 3rd in Politico Europe. The Prime Minister of Greenland called for independence from Denmark and removing the shackles of colonialism in a strident New Year's address this week. Greenland has had its own parliament and largely been self-governing since 1979. And as you both point out, there are other models other than just a straight acquisition. The U.S. has some kind of defense agreements with Pacific Island states, for example. So that would be one approach. But again, it seems to me that would require wooing the Greenlanders, which does not seem to be what Trump is doing. This week, Trump Force One landed in Greenland with Donald Trump Jr. He went on a tour. The government was making clear that he was there as a private visitor. This was not any sort of government-to-government contact. But there was a video of Trump Jr. and Trump Sr., the president-elect, speaking on speakerphone saying, "We're going to treat you well." And Bill, I can only think that somebody in Greenland would find that a bit presumptuous.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the people in Greenland think of Denmark and how they're living now, what their complaints are. So we'll have to see. I want to say at the outset, I think Trump is missing a key part of this kind of diplomatic engagement. If I were him, I would not only be going after Denmark to give us something on Greenland or something. I would be, no offense to Alicia, but I would be pressing the Spanish to take back California and the Dutch to take back New York. It would solve a lot of America's problems if we could get rid of those two. And Trump has overlooked that. But in seriousness, there's an argument that Trump is his usual blundering self and just full of bluster and ruining prospects. I think we won't know that till it happens. The MO seems very typical. Just go in hard-hitting, make some outlandish statements, And basically, I think what he's saying, you better take me seriously. This is a new ball game. We're going to play by different rules. The things he complains about or says he's going to do, like make Canada a state or march the military into Panama, I'm not sure he's going to do. You have to find out what he's really after. Is it a better port deal in Panama, better controls on Chinese? We'll find out. But I think this is classic Trump negotiating style. Make these outlandish demands that seem crazy, but work to something more practical. And the test of that is whether it works or not.
Hang tight. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Another piece of the press conference that has prompted interest is Trump's comments on wind energy, in particular the remark that he wants a policy of no more wind farms being built in the United States. Listen to this.
You can talk about windmills. They litter our country. They're littered all over our country, like dropping paper, like dropping garbage in a field, and that's what happens to them because in a period of time they turn to garbage. Most expensive energy ever. They only work if you get subsidy. The only people that want them are the people that are getting rich off windmills, getting massive subsidies from the U.S. government, and it's the most expensive energy there is. It's many, many times more expensive than clean natural gas. So we're going to try and have a policy where no windmills are being...
Alicia, what do you make of that remark, particularly the comment on the expensiveness of wind energy and the idea that it requires subsidies to be competitive?
So a few things. It does require subsidies to be competitive. The reason why wind is supposedly cheap, or the left claims it's cheap, is because of these subsidies. Now, the levelized cost for wind is a little more than for a new natural gas plant. But when you factor in the subsidies under the Inflation Reduction Act, which can, under the investment tax credit, can offset about 50% of the cost of wind, and the production tax credit, which is mostly used for actually the onshore production because it's more generous, can offset 80% of the cost. It's about 25% cheaper. And there's a problem is that all these tax credits actually allow these wind producers to make money even when there's no demand for their power. And so this can actually lead to negative pricing, so to speak, in which they actually end up paying the grid to take their power because they're producing so much of it. And this creates all kinds of market distortions where these low prices are pushing coal, nuclear, natural gas plants to prematurely retire. So back to the point about are they cheap or would they be built without tax credits? Probably not, especially the offshore wind, which even with the tax credits are about 2 to 3 times more than a natural gas plant. And you've seen a lot of projects being canceled, both in the U.S. and abroad, because of the rising interest rates and inflation. Ørsted, which is one of the major wind developers, took a $4 billion write-down on a couple of projects off the New Jersey coast. It's also reconsidering projects off of New York for those very reasons and begging for more federal money because even the current subsidies, 50%, essentially a 50% tax credit isn't enough. So I think Trump's right that these projects require subsidies to be built. And why are we subsidizing them when, you can build a natural gas plant that will run at all times without subsidies? And it's really, the left doesn't really have a response for when you point out that, well, if renewables were so cheap, why are electric rates soaring as they increase? And that's partly because, well, they also require backup energy from natural gas, especially which can, when you have to back something up, that can be even more expensive. So I think here Trump actually has a point.
Like many people, I think, I'm not against these kinds of alternative energy sources where they make sense. But Bill, it strikes me that the extent to which this stuff is supported by subsidies and cross subsidies is not appreciated by the broad public. And related, this is a story I saw today from Axios. It says in the 9 months through September 2024, 43% of Tesla's net income came from selling regulatory credits to other car makers. Since 2012, 34% of Tesla's total profits have come from such credit sales. And I think that is a fact that is lost on many people who see these EVs driving around, see the wind farms being put up, and think that this stuff is competing in the market and succeeding in the market on its own terms. And that just it does not seem to be the case. And I guess my takeaway is let it compete.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's what Alicia was alluding to. We see all these things, and I would go further. It's not just the public that doesn't see the cost. It's the people who design these things, these subsidy for alternative fuels. One, we don't see them, so we don't know the total and true cost, so we can make a reasonable decision. And two, sometimes they're hidden. They're hidden on purpose. They're very hard to see. So one of the big problems with all the green energy, as you put it, Kyle, there's nothing wrong with electric cars or wind power. There's nothing wrong with using it. The question is, would anyone use it if it was priced to reflect its real costs? And if it doesn't reflect its real costs, you're usually dumping those costs on taxpayers. And it's very inefficient. And it's amazing to me how much inefficiency we have because we don't know the real costs of things. And so I think that's the real problem. And that's kind of what he's getting at in his indirect way. We're subsidizing all this stuff. Donald Trump, we're subsidizing all this stuff. It doesn't make sense, and we should stop doing it. I think that's the problem with the windmills, not the windmills themselves.